What are Kyle McCord's expectations, and who should be the backup quarterback for Syracuse football this season?
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are joined by Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House, and we're talking about quarterbacks. Kyle McCord, the unquestioned starter for this team, but who should be the backup quarterback behind him? We're going to discuss that here on today's podcast, plus the best and worst position groups on this team for next season. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, Neil, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Let's just start off right away with Kyle McCord. And what are your expectations for McCord this season?
Well, thanks for having me on, Jackson. As always, I really appreciate you, brother. I expect him to lead them to the CFP and win the Heisman. That's my expectations for this season. I mean,
hey, you know what? Right off the bat, you're jumping off with fire here. Why
sugarcoat it? I think that I'm just really fascinated by this upcoming season. Obviously, the excitement, the hype built around Fran Brown and his staff, the recruiting, both at the high school level in 2024, 25, et cetera. And then obviously out of the transfer portal with Kyle McCord and other really strong players. I think Kyle McCord, he was solid at Ohio State. I'm sure Buckeyes fans might have things to say, good or bad, about him. But last time I checked, they were 11-1 last year. They're in the regular season when he was there, with their only loss to the eventual national champion, Michigan. And I think he threw for like over 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I mean, that's solid. Did they expect more in Columbus? That's for them to talk about. I think that Kyle is going to fit right in well. He's from New Jersey. He's known multiple Syracuse coaches since he was a kid. And I think he's coming in. He's going to lead the team, obviously. I think the offense can be really good this year because it's going to be much better balanced than last year or even other recent seasons, given Kyle as the signal caller, plus all their weapons at tight end and wide receiver, and then a nice running back room. So if knock on wood, if the offensive line holds up, I think they could be a solid, strong offensive team. So is Kyle going to be, on the all ACC first team? I don't know. There's a lot of good quarterbacks in the ACC, but this is no disrespect to Garrett Schrader because he was also injured for a lot of last year, but this is certainly an upgrade, again, assuming Kyle remains injury-free, and I think he's going to have a good year.
I agree with you. I think the difference between McCord and Schrader, just by the brief amount that we've watched of McCord, especially in a Syracuse uniform, I'm really only going to take the spring game.
Sure.
It's the zip on the ball.
Yeah.
It's the zip. Like, I don't really know how else to describe it. Other than it looks significantly different. I used to say with Garrett Schrader, when he throws the ball, it looks like he's really putting a lot of effort into it. Mm-hmm. And the ball comes out and it looks like a lollipop. It almost looks like it's like rainbowing out of him. He was pretty good, but he clearly had his limitations, especially because he's a converted wide receiver.
Sure.
He was a wide receiver. Kyle McCord was a 5-star high school prospect. Mm-hmm. Maybe he didn't live up to the crazy expectations that you're going to have at Ohio State, right? The 3 quarterbacks that came before him were all first-round NFL draft picks.
Sure.
But, yeah, he was a top 10 quarterback in the country on quarterback rating. Mm-hmm. Top 10 in the country. And I get he had weapons and all of that. But we're going to find out this season with their new quarterback just how good or can anyone go into the Ohio State offense and play decent ball.
Right. Yeah. And you're right about Schrader. And I really liked him as a football player. He's tough. He was going through injuries, definitely not as skilled, quote unquote, in terms of a pocket passer as Kyle McCord, but he could run the ball and he just gave it his all. So, hats off to him. And I really loved him from that standpoint. But you're right about Kyle. He can sling it. I mean, he really can. So if he's gelling with this receiver room, whether it's Gadsden and Villari and Jamie Trumbull at tight end and all the traditional wide receivers, both, returnees and transfers and, high school commits, they've got a lot of weapons. They really do. And so if they're all gelling and the offense is gelling on the rest of the staff, I think they can be really good. Are they going to be the best offense in the ACC? I don't know. Who knows?
I saw a recent rating out there that had them in like the way bottom half, and I was like, I don't know about that. I think they're going to have a pretty good offense.
I always acknowledge my homerism. I went to Syracuse, obviously, right, lead a fan site and all that. But, I'm not afraid to call it like I see it as well. And the Syracuse offense last year had a rough go, especially after Schrader got injured. And, Villari doing the Wildcat and all that, and they were really limited. LaQuinn Allen had a good year. But this year, again, knock on wood, stay away from injuries. They have, I think, really solid depth. I think they have really solid depth across the board in most position groups. But again, between Kyle and then the receiver room and the running backs, I think this could be a really fun year. And I think Kyle, I think he could, he was like you said, he was a 5-star recruit coming out of, I think it was St. Joe's Prep in Philly. He was a 4-star, highly rated prospect in the transfer portal. A lot, some national pundits were like, why did he go to Syracuse? That's a step down and all that. And, that's fine. Those are optics, but
sorry to cut you off here.
No.
Most schools going to be a step down from Ohio State. How many schools are a better standing than Ohio State? You might be able to, you can only really count it on your palm. Georgia? Well, they're set at Georgia.
Yeah, no.
Alabama is set.
Alabama, sure. Oregon's going to be really good this year. You've got,
Michigan. Like, you're not going to go from Ohio State to Michigan. You can't do that.
I think the thing, it was just so fascinating after he transferred to Syracuse and all the pundits saying stuff. Some was positive, some was negative nonsense. I mean, I get it. Syracuse obviously, has an historical brand, but in recent seasons under Dino Babers, no disrespect, I think he's a really nice guy, but they went to a couple bowls, but they were not nationally relevant, and they weren't really all that relevant since joining the ACC. And even in the last 2 years, they went to 2 bowl games, fine, but they started off 6-0 and then 4-0, but they ended up 13-13 combined. So for a guy like Kyle to transfer from Ohio State to Syracuse maybe leaves some people scratching their heads. But again, you got to dig deeper and look at the context. Fran Brown and multiple assistants are from New Jersey, the Philadelphia area. They've known him since he was a kid. Yep. That kind of connection, that speaks volumes. So I get it. Ohio State is up here and Syracuse is certainly not anywhere near that. But who knows where Fran Brown's going to lead the Orange? And I think it could be a really good fit given those long-standing relationships and given the targets that McCord is going to have to throw to between receivers, tight ends, and running backs out of the backfield.
He definitely has the upside to be an all-ACC quarterback. I did see online out there, they released the preseason all-ACC team. Keep in mind, well, McCord didn't make it, but keep in mind, they only took one quarterback, and it was only the first team that they released. That was it. Right. So I think Cam Ward from Miami made it. It was
Cam Ward,
Cam Ward was the 4th-ranked transfer quarterback in the country. McCord was down at 14th.
Right.
And Cam Ward was a top 15 overall transfer in the country. So I completely understood it, and it's one of those things where I think McCord has the upside to being a first-teamer. I certainly think he could be on the first, second, or third team at the end of the season. But, for now, preseason first team, I'm not so sure. But I do have high hopes for Kyle McCord this season. All right, Neil, let's talk about the backup quarterbacks.
Sure.
Because we have kind of alluded to it, that if McCord stays healthy, with those weapons around him, actually in yesterday's podcast, I talked about LaQuinn Allen and Will Nixon and Yassine Willis, the true freshman, and they got some dudes. They got some weapons. And the offensive line, it maybe is a work in progress, but we'll see how it all shapes out over the course of training camp. It's one thing to watch baseball on TV. That at times can get pretty boring, but going to a game in person is an awesome experience, and I'm looking forward to watching the New York Mets for the rest of the summer. And the way I'll watch the Mets in person is by using Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. All you have to do is go to Gametime and search the team you want to see of your choosing. It can be MLB or any league for that matter, and ticket options will appear right away. My favorite part is the all-in pricing feature. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On College Football Podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and whenever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The backup quarterback is wide open, according to Fran Brown. And there are a few names that I can throw out to you. Carlos Del Rio-Wilson, Braeden Davis, Michael Johnson Jr. If you recall, when he transferred, he was listed as a weapon from Florida Atlantic.
Right.
And there's also Jakhari Williams, a three-star quarterback prospect for this upcoming season. Neil, in your opinion, who do you think should be the backup quarterback for this team?
I have no idea. To answer your question,
it would be a tough question.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I will say, I believe Braeden Davis has moved over to wide receiver, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know that he's been taking reps. I don't want to misspeak, but I feel like I've seen some recent stuff out there that he wasn't necessarily in the mix. But I do. It does sound to me like it'll be Carlos Del Rio-Wilson, Michael Johnson Jr., or Jakhari Williams. I think the safe answer would be Carlos Del Rio-Wilson because he's been with the program. He's gotten reps in the past. And, he can throw it. He just hasn't gotten a lot of reps. And when he's been out there, I don't think he's done a ton. Not trying to, be mean or anything, but, he just hasn't had a lot of chances. So I would go with him. Michael Johnson Jr., he was at, I believe, Penn State and then Florida Atlantic. Yep. The son of Michael Johnson, one of the assistants. Yes, listed as a weapon. I think he's played wide receiver too.
Yeah, I think he's also maybe played running back. I've never seen someone listed as a weapon as their position. I've seen athlete.
Athlete all the time.
That's usually what they say.
Yeah.
Weapon is just what?
Hey, listen, if he's a weapon, cool. And given where he's played in the past, from what I've read about him and whatnot, he seems like a super versatile and athletic athlete. But again, what kind of reps has he had in college? I don't believe I don't even know if he's thrown I was looking up his stats before we were coming on. I don't think he's thrown a pass, or if he's thrown, it's very, very limited.
I think he maybe threw one or two passes. Yeah. I don't have the stats on me, but at the top of my head, if I remember, when I said it on the podcast, and I believe he transferred like months ago, I might have said his stats, and it was like one or two career passes that he's thrown. Okay,
so since we're talking here, and I've got up a lot of different stuff on my web browsers, it looks like in 2023 he was 0 for 1 at Florida Atlantic pass attempts, according to ESPN. So,
all right,
take it for what it's worth. And then,
well, ESPN is not usually wrong about their stats.
No, sometimes it's interesting because when I write articles, not to go off on a tangent, I look up ESPN or some of the other media outlets, but then I always go to SU Athletics website, and usually they're pretty similar. There might be a smidge of a difference, but anyway, one way or another, he hasn't thrown a lot of passes in college. And then, Jakhari Williams came high 3-star. I think for a while he might have been a 4-star on some of the recruiting websites, whatever. But I mean, he's really talented as well, but he's a true freshman. So you've got, Carlos Del Rio-Wilson, who's been with the program and it has taken some reps, some snaps in games. You've got a transfer in and a true freshman. And then I believe they have 2 other freshmen on the roster as well. I don't know. I think they might be preferred walk-ons. AJ Miller, am I getting that name right? I think so.
You might be, but I don't think they're really like. I know the quarterback competition's open, but I think it's down to like a few names, and that's about it.
Yeah. So again, if I had to guess right now, it's Carlos would be in there at the number 2 spot based on his experience level. But hey, listen, let's see how fall camp goes ahead of the season starting in a couple of weeks. It's Fran Brown, like you said, he has definitely not been shy about saying that they need to close the gap between Kyle and the backups. And they're not going to necessarily be at Kyle's level. Kyle's
a start. Your backup is never typically going to be on the level of your starter. However, especially in the NFL, but in college, it sometimes will happen. I've seen it before, especially when it's a true freshman.
Right.
But usually those are the generational quarterback recruits. The 2 examples that come off my head are Trevor Lawrence. He was better than the starter. I think it was Kelly Bryant. He was the starter, but he was better than him. He was better. And I refuse to believe that he wasn't better in training camp, but they just gave it to Kelly Bryant as the incumbent starter.
Sure.
Because I'm of the belief that you don't just go from a clear backup to a clear, definitive, one of the best players in the country in 5 weeks.
Right.
Like I'm just not of that belief. And then there was also Caleb Williams, who did something similar at Oklahoma. So Jakhari Williams is not on that level in terms of recruiting. But sometimes it does happen where the backup quarterback can actually be better than the starter. They're just not playing.
Absolutely. And, we'll see how things shake out. I would assume, unless things drastically change, that Carlos will be number 2. And then in terms of the depth chart, number 3, Jakhari or Michael Johnson. But it would be we all hope that Kyle is healthy all year long and all that, because obviously that could be concerning. But those other 3 guys, I think they all have good skill sets. They just got to get reps and they got to get used to, well, Carlos doesn't need to get used to this. Well, everyone's getting used to the system because it's a relatively new coaching staff, but he's been with the program. The other 2 guys have not. So we'll see. It's, is it a cause for concern? I don't like to get concerned about things until there's a reason to be concerned, but I would say it's like something to monitor, something to keep an eye out for. Absolutely.
Well, I'll take it a step further. When I look at this roster on paper, maybe it's a good thing that I'm actually saying this. I think their biggest concern is the backup quarterback.
Okay, that's fair.
I think it is because, listen, if Kyle McCord doesn't get hurt, he doesn't start playing so horribly, right? Those are the 2 outcomes he wouldn't be playing. Then they're going to be fine.
Right.
They'll be fine. They'll be a good team in all likelihood.
Sure.
I think they're going to win 8 games this season.
Sounds good.
Provided McCord's healthy for basically the entirety of it.
Entire season, yeah.
If he goes down, and when I look at the options, Carlos Del Rio-Wilson, Michael Johnson Jr. has thrown 1 pass, and a true freshman, Jakhari Williams, and I don't think this team's a bowl team if one of those 3 is playing.
That's fair.
That's how important this backup quarterback situation is. Now, that's a good weakness to have. If your weakness is your backup quarterback and not anywhere really in the starting 22, then I would say that's fine.
That's totally fair. Yeah,
you just got to hope that McCord we just got to hope he doesn't roll an ankle or something. Listen, I'm a Jets fan. I'm starred, right? Aaron Rodgers, we didn't have a backup plan. It was Aaron Rodgers for the whole year last year. And if he goes down, like he went down in 4 plays, then
I know that was
Zach
unreal.
Wilson again. Like, there was no backup plan or Tim Boyle. So I wish the team had a better backup option, but it's not going to matter if Kyle McCord stays healthy and or plays well.
Sure.
Because those are the only 2 outcomes he wouldn't.
Yeah, and I was just looking up while you were talking. It looks like Carlos threw about 50 passes last year. So, I mean, take it.
What was his completion rate? Probably around 50%. right? Off the top of my head.
Let's see. It looks like it was 51%.
I know my numbers.
That's impressive. Yeah. So I mean, he can throw the ball.
Not impressive for a completion rate.
No, I was saying that's impressive that you remembered that.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
no,
well,
51% is not super good.
I was gonna be like, Neil, you know football, you know 50%.
Yeah, no, he
basketball.
I mean, he can throw it. He can sling the ball. But just a question of accuracy, consistency, reps, and all that. But everything you're saying is all legitimate. It's all fair. Let's just keep our fingers crossed here.
Yeah, we're gonna cross our fingers. Let's now transition over to the best and worst position groups on the team. So let's start off with the best. Neil, in your opinion, what's the best position group on this team?
I'd say the receiver room, but I guess that can be broken up into tight ends and more traditional wide receivers. And, the tight end group has gotten a ton of, positive, praise from pundits out there because it's got some really good players and it's really deep. Obviously, it starts with Oronde Gadsden, the second, who was, as we all know, was injured for much of last year, but before that was an all ACC first-team performer. And coming into last year, he was an All-American candidate. Assuming he's good to go, and by all accounts he is, he will lead that position group, and he's really good. But then you got Dan Villari, who became just a huge fan favorite last year for his toughness and doing the Wildcat, and he can catch passes. He's a good blocker and all that. But they got other guys. They got Mang. They got I'm really high. Like, if we talk about incoming freshmen, one of the guys I'm highest on is Jamie Trimble.
Yeah.
Who I believe is I don't know if it was either him or Marcellus Barnes are the highest rated, 2024s.
It's actually, it depends on the service.
Or King Joseph Edwards. I
think on 24/7 Sports, it's actually Emmanuel Ross.
Ross is really high up there on 3. Whatever.
Yeah,
we're splitting hairs. All those guys.
There's 5 4-star recruits, and depending on what service you use,
Willis is a 4-star on Rivals. Yeah, exactly. So, but if if we're talking about tight ends, I think Jamie's. I don't know how many reps he's going to get this year, given the depth, and he's obviously an incoming freshman. But I think he's going to be really good. So the tight ends, and if you combined it with the receivers, oh yeah, that's looking delicious to me. But if you're separating those, I'd go tight ends, and I think the secondary is going to devil this year. Just the defensive backs as a whole. It's just obviously led by Justin Barron, but then you've got Deuce, you got Devin Grant, you got other guys as well. I think it's going to be really good. I do. What about you? What do you think?
So I also agree with you on the tight ends. Because I consider Gadsden a tight end, because I know people say he's a receiver, he's a tight end. Well, what's he listed? He's listed as a tight end. Yep. I'm gonna consider him a tight end until that changes.
Absolutely.
You got Gadsden, who is not only their best player, like he's definitely their best player. He's also their best NFL draft prospect, and there is a difference between the two. There is a difference between NFL prospect and best players in college. There's a correlation, but there is a difference. I think Dan Villari, if he was the starter, we would be more than happy with that.
Absolutely.
And he's the backup.
Right.
He's the backup. And with those two leading the way, and you got Max Mang as a blocking tight end, he can come in on situations near the goal line, right?
He's solid. He's
fine. Like, especially for a third string tight end, you can do a whole lot worse than Max Mang. I'm also not going to freak out about a third string tight end here.
Fair.
And then you mentioned Jamie Trimble, and I obviously have high hopes for him too. But I think this unit is so strong to the point where he doesn't need to see the field. He doesn't.
He might not. I mean, or he might if they're in games where, let's hope they're blowing people out, not getting blown out. Yeah, I agree.
I think it would be wise if he were to redshirt. I mean, I'm sure the coaching staff and everything's going to figure that out. But you got Gadsden, you got Villari, you got Mang. So what about Trimble? You can only have 11 players on the field. 5 of them are going to be offensive linemen. You got a quarterback, and you're probably going to have a running back too. So now you're down to 4. And you're going to have a couple receivers on the field at least. You can only have so many people. So I don't know if Trimble's really going to play much, but at the same time, I don't think that's actually a good thing. True freshmen aren't really supposed to play all that lot.
I mean, I think it'd be like a quote unquote good problem to have, so to speak, if the team's playing well and the veteran guys are leading the charge, and if he's getting some reps, when games are, there's a big margin, late in the game or whatever. Yeah, I don't think it'd be the end of the world. Absolutely not. No, I agree with you about the tight end. I think the running back room is really nice too. I do.
Yeah. I think it's good. They got 2 quality backups there. And by the way, for those that might be saying, how can you not play Tremble? Marvin Harrison redshirted out of Ohio State. Like, even the best players in the country, the best recruits in the country will not typically play in their true. This ain't basketball. Football is different. You usually will, even the 5-stars redshirt in football.
Absolutely.
Even the 5s.
Yeah.
So I think that's good for the best position group. We're both kind of in agreement. It's typically on the offense for them. I think their offense is slightly better than their defense. Although I do agree with you with the DBs. They're good too. What do you think the worst position group is?
Man, I hate this question.
I know nobody wants it, but we have it. It's a good topic. I mean, we can't always, lay the pom-poms out. We got to say what
Sure.
We have to look at the team and say, what do you think the strengths are and what do you think the weaknesses are? We're trying to be at least a little bit objective.
Okay, so if we can, since I'm a words guy, if we can move away from worst and say position group that kind of watching the most closely to see how they fare, so to speak, something like that. Is that okay? Anyway,
fine. If you want to rephrase it, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
What's the one that you're a little bit concerned about?
I think the 3 main position groups that I'm kind of looking at the most closely to see how they fare along your theme would be both the offensive and defensive lines as well as special teams. And that doesn't necessarily mean I think they're bad, but something has to be better than something else. So
that's what it is. It's not necessarily calling them the worst. It's really the weakest.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're looking out for. So I'll just give quick thoughts on each. So on the offensive line, it's been well documented that in recent years the offensive line has had its ups and downs for various reasons: depth, injuries, just not executing. I think the offensive line this year is going to be better than in years past. I think there's more depth from a numbers perspective. And again, we just have to look at how guys are performing and also, do we get the injury bug? I hope we don't. On the defensive line, as you know, we just, we lost a guy the other day.
Ingram went down with that Achilles. That's horrible.
Horrible. I mean, just sending
career ending too. That's awful.
Yeah, because I believe he's a redshirt senior. So, sending positive vibes to him, that's just awful. So, we'll see how that affects the depth there. Although I'll tell you on the edge, man, one of my 3 or 4 favorite players ahead of the season is Diggs. I think that dude is just going to be an absolute beast. Absolute beast. But so I'd say on the defensive line, especially with the Ingram news, let's see how that affects the depth. And then in terms of special teams, Pena was in, I think did he play in 1 game last year? He
played in 1 game and that was it.
Right. And, he's, again, assuming kind of like with Gadsden or some other guys, assuming he's fully healthy, that dude is a lethal, use the word weapon. He, from both a receiver standpoint and as a return man, can really do some damage. And he was named to a couple of watch lists, including one today with Gadsden, comeback player of the year. And I mean, those preseason watch lists have.
I would also keep an eye on Malachi James, the true freshman running back.
That dude is fast.
If he's going to play, he's not really going to see the field much as a running back.
Right,
but if he's going to play, it's going to be as a special teamer. And that guy, I know we always say he has track speed, but a lot of these guys have track speed. A lot of them do because they're just such great athletes. They run fast.
Yep.
No. What I said on the podcast yesterday about him is that no. Like he has real track speed.
That dude's like Olympic
track athlete of the year in New Jersey.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. He's
real.
That's not blowing smoke. That dude can run.
Yeah. They can all run. They're all Division.
But I mean, I follow his stuff on Twitter or X or whatever, and I see he's competing and stuff, and he's just crushing it. And yeah, that dude is really fast. Yeah. So we'll see what kind of game time he gets. But Pena's healthy. That obviously with the return game, that's great. And then hopefully both the place kicking and the punting is solid. So we'll see. I'm not saying it's not going to be, but I'm not as certain, so to speak, on how excellent or not excellent the special teams is going to be. And they have but they got a lot of new great assistants, this year, and we'll see. But if I had to look at 3 position groups where I'm most concerned, I hate using that word, but I would say the lines and the special teams.
I'm going to say most concerned about the defensive line.
Fair.
Because when I look at the offensive line, I think it can be mitigated simply by the fact that if McCord gets rid of the ball fast, then a lot of times I put the blame on the quarterback.
Hold on to it too long.
You got to get rid of the ball. You got to make a decision quickly. If the ball is not out of your hands in 2.5 seconds or less, like that's not on the offensive line. If they can hold up for a couple seconds, you got to get rid of the ball. Period. End of story.
That's fair.
So if you can just hold not actually hold, like we don't want penalty flags here, but if you can keep them at bay for a couple seconds, they'll be fine if McCord's just getting rid of the ball. And I look at the special teams. Pena's coming back. You got Malachi James. They do have a really good punter in Jack Stonehouse.
Stonehouse is good, yeah.
Denneberg's a guy who I'm kind of concerned about as a kicker, but, I mean, we're talking about specialists as a whole. Mm-hmm. So you got good returners. You got a good punter. Let's just hope the kicker's okay.
Sure.
Defensive line, they got Fidel Diggs, and then
not sure how the other guys are going to play.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. And it just took a hit with Braylon Ingram going down.
That definitely was a bummer.
I know Braylon Ingram is really more of a depth option, but you need depth. You need players, and that's another player that just went down.
Yeah, especially because if I'm understanding things correctly, aren't they in their defensive schemes under Robinson going to
4-2-5?
Look to add a fourth.
They're not like officially saying their schemes, but I mean, we're just assuming 4-2-5 with Robinson because that's what he's run in the past.
Right. So you obviously have another lineman added in and moved up from linebacker, and obviously we all know that Marlowe Wax is probably going to be a beast this year, so I'm not too worried about the linebackers.
Oh, yeah, linebackers, they're fine. They got Wax, they got McDonald, they got Sparrow, they got all those guys. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.